Good morning and welcome to another episode of Boss Spotlight. I am your host, Tamara Diane. This Boss Spotlight is brought to you by Fifth Third Bank and New York Life. And this morning, I have the beautiful attorney, Darshun Kendrick, here with us from the Kendrick Law Practice. How are you doing this morning?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on.
It is my pleasure. Now, I am under the understanding that you have switched your business model. You have shifted your focus. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Let our viewers know a little bit about you and the process and kind of what prompted the change.
Sure, thanks. So we have done sort of a rebranding of the firm over the last 3 months. And before I was a general corporate attorney, so I helped businesses throughout the state of Georgia with their incorporation and setup and paperwork and legal compliance and things like that. And what I've noticed over the course of the 5 years that I've had my law firm is the lack of diversity, particularly women and people of color in the private equity space, meaning using private equity funds in order to raise money to finance either your startup business or your growing business. And so I've always been interested in private equities or securities work as it's more formally called. And it was a small part of my practice before. But when I saw this need, I said, this is a space that not only can I do some good because I'm going to be able to educate minorities, women, and especially African Americans about the access to capital that they do have and what it is and how it works and things like that. But it also allows me to really, really love my job because I do love securities work, and I love the dynamics of business, which is why I went back to school and got my MBA, just because I love the way that whole structure is set up. And so that is what my firm is doing now, is helping businesses get access and learn about raising capital through private equity.
Gotcha, gotcha. And for those simple people like me, can you explain really quickly what exactly is private equity?
Well, private equity, as the name entails, is the opposite of public equity. And so the tickers that you see on the New York Stock Exchange and all these different stock exchanges, that's public equity. So if you buy stock in Coca-Cola or you buy stock in Home Depot, those are public companies because they're traded on the public market. They're offered to everyone. Well, private equity is the opposite of that. So you will have private companies that will seek to raise equity, but they don't want to be listed on the New York Stock Exchange. So if Kendrick Law Practice wanted to raise private equity, I don't want to be traded on the stock exchange. I don't want to go through the burdensome SEC regulations and have to pay all the money to register with the SEC. And so I want to stay a private company. And the funds that I raise to do that are private equity funds. And the way that you stay private is through an array of different rules and regulations to make sure that you don't have to be listed on the New York Stock Exchange and go through SEC regulation. But that essentially is what it is. It's a private company that's raising funds a certain way in order to stay private.
Gotcha. And how can that company use those funds in order to grow their business?
Well, there's a number of different ways that there's no law prohibiting how you use those funds. But a lot of times the market or your investors will tell you how to use those funds. So obviously if you draft up a business plan that says that you're going to use 100% of the funds for salaries, you're going to be hard pressed to find any investors that want to invest in your company. However, if you have a new app and you are using it for R&D, research and development of that app, then an investor is going to be more likely to see the value in giving you those funds. So there's no restriction on what you can use those capital funds for, but a lot of times investors will tell you before they give you the money what you need to use those funds for.
Gotcha, gotcha. And I know you have a term in your company, the DK pledge. What exactly is that?
Yes, the DJK pledge is simply my professional and personal pledge to society in general. And that is to empower and educate my community, especially women and minorities, about how to access private equity to grow their company and create generational wealth. And again, this stems from over the years of running my law firm and just being a lawyer, seeing how many or how least of women and minorities are actually in the private equity space, whether it be VC funds, whether it be investors, whether it be companies that are taking advantage of private equity. We just don't know what is out there. And so this is my personal and professional pledge, is to make sure that I go out and spread the word about private equity, how to access it, how to do it right, and to make sure that we are able to get companies with the capital that they need in order to grow their business, but not only that, create generational wealth by passing that business on that they worked hard to grow to the next generation.
Gotcha, gotcha. And that's huge because a lot of people, especially in our space, the small business owners, they are really trying to figure out how to just make it and how to say, okay, I want to be in business for longer than 5 years. But I think the lack comes where we don't really understand that if we're starting a business, then we're supposed to do it for the long haul, that our children's can run it. And creating that opportunity in regards to growing by raising that capital is huge. So what type of companies typically can take advantage of this private equity capital raising scenario?
Well, it depends on the investor, and I hate to sound like a lawyer, but a lot of this really just depends. We have companies that are startups, and depending on the product, the industry, the founders, depending on a lot of things, depends on what type of equity you can have access to. There are, of course, angel investors who are more likely to take on more risk. Angel investors are wealthy individuals that typically invest in startup businesses, versus venture capital firms are more likely to invest in high growth, growing businesses. So you've been in business over 2 years and maybe 5 years, and you have something in maybe the tech or biotech industry that the investors in the venture capital firms see as going to be very, very high growth, because these two investors have two very different goals. The angel investor is not so much worried about getting their money back fast or anything like that. Venture capital firms have a very, very different focus. They want they want to be able to get their money, their return on their investment in less than 5 to 10 years at the very maximum. So they need to be in an industry that's going to be high growth. So the answer to that is it depends on what your business is doing, which sort of private equity you're going to qualify for.
Gotcha, gotcha. And exactly how does the Kendrick Law Practice help these companies through this private placement offering process?
Yeah, well, what we do is we offer services from the very beginning. Once you've made that decision that you do want to raise private equity funds, all the way to the end, which usually ends by filing some paperwork or some agreement. So that can, if you begin in the very, very beginning process, then what we do is work with you to make sure that your entity is set up the correct way, because not every entity can receive private equity firms. You have to be structured a certain way to during the negotiation process. Even though we cannot connect people to investors because it violates securities law, once you do have those investors in place, we can work out the details between the investor and the issuing company, which would be our client, to make sure that you don't have to worry about getting into the details of the deal. You let us do the negotiation with your consent, of course, but that you can focus on building a strong business. Because if you get too detailed in all the negotiations, you will find yourself being a full-time fundraiser and not working on the business. And so we take that burden away. We also draft any number of documents that you would need to secure an investor. We do due diligence. So for certain private placement offerings, you have to have certain documents to prove that the investor is what we call an accredited investor. So we really do offer sort of a full scale of services that start from the very beginning, once you've decided that you do want to raise funds, all the way to filing all the paperwork in the state, on the state level and on the federal level, to complete and make sure that you can keep those funds because you've done everything that you needed to at the very, very end of the process.
Awesome, awesome. So you help with basically the logistics of it, while the business owner would find, an ideal investor, and you make sure that that investor is legitimate and that the process is actually going to be completed. Is that kind of correct?
Right. Not only completed, but completed legally. There's several documents that you need to have in order to make sure that you solidify the relationship between the issuing company and the investor, whoever that investor is. But also, there's an array of compliance regulatory paperwork that you have to file with the state and with the federal government. So it really is about making sure that at the end of your capital fundraising campaign, you are able to keep the funds that you raised because you have complied not only with the investor and what they need, but also with the federal and state government, the paperwork that you need to do.
Gotcha, gotcha. And so, how would a company that's considering this, starting this process, what do they do in regards to connecting with you? Do you offer some type of free consultation, or do they email you? How do they start that conversation with you?
Yeah, there are several ways. Most people know that I am on social media. So if you go to kendricklaw.net, it has the link to all my social media, my SlideShare account, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. So you can definitely connect with me that way. You can also email me at dkendrick@kendricklaw.net. That's another way that people contact me, or just give me a call, 678-739-8109. We offer two consultations. One is a 15-minute services consultation that's free. We don't give any legal advice because we haven't established an attorney-client relationship at that point. But what we will do is talk about services, listen to sort of what your plans are for the future, and then give you some guidance as to how we can help with that process. And then the other one is a 1 hour crowdfunding consultation where we actually sit down with your business and any business documents or anybody that you want to bring to the meeting, and we map out what's the next step based on where you are in the fundraising process. So we'll go over what private placement offerings you would qualify for. If you're doing something that has a timeline on it, we'll tell you, hey, if in a few days you're going to be violating federal law if you don't file such and such a form. So we really do go through, take that 1 hour and go through your business and just issue spot some issues that you have, that you'll have in the future, and let you know what's the best path for you to get most success out of your fundraising campaign.
That's huge. That's huge. And you also have a conference call that you open up to certain individuals. Is that correct too?
That is, and it's open for anybody who is interested in raising private equity for funds. So if anybody goes to my website under news and events, and again that website is www.kendricklaw.net, and go to news and events, then you'll see the schedule of.
Okay. And she just dropped off, unfortunately. But we will make sure that. Oh, there she goes. Are you still with us?
Hello.
Okay, okay. Got a little.
Sorry. Yeah, I think the connection went out. I apologize about that. But I'm not sure where I was. But the point is yes, I have a conference call. It's Mondays at 11 o'clock Eastern, and we discuss a variety of private equity topics. And we have them recorded, so you can go to my website, kendricklaw.net, and go under news and events, and you'll have all the recordings of the past conference calls that we have had about crowdfunding and about private equity. And so you're able to take 15 to 20 minutes and just take and listen to that, and then contact me if you have any questions about how we can help you with any step in that process.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I'm so glad you're back. I was like, no, I think everybody needs to hear about that. But okay, so really quickly, what drives your passion and your ability to, just want to keep pushing and educating minorities and women about this process?
I think it's just the energy that I get from women and from African Americans whenever I go out to networking events. I had an opportunity to go to a group, Startup Chicks, which I know not a lot of people have heard of. but just being around a group of women who are trying to start their business and don't really have the same opportunities or access as our men counterparts do, and really being able to lend a listening ear and a helping hand is just worth its weight in gold, and it makes me feel good as a person, as a lawyer, as a public servant. It just makes me just keeps me going to continue to do the work that I'm able to do. I also had an opportunity to speak at Dragon Con, which was in Atlanta this last couple of weeks, and I spoke on a panel, and there was about 100 people in the room, and I was one of three women in the room and the only African American in the room. And what that tells me is that there's still a long way to go to get businesses, minority businesses, to realize that private equity is not unattainable. It is not unattainable. You just have to go about it the correct way. You have to invest in good people around you in order to get access to it. And you need to be educated about the process and the steps and what you need to do as a business. So things like that just keep me pushing forward, and I know I can make a dent.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. So before we wrap up here, because I know you have a lot to do today, it's a Monday, and I know your inbox is probably full of stuff to do. But before we kind of wrap up, are there any final thoughts or anything else you want to share before we let you go?
No, I just want to thank you for this opportunity. Obviously, this is a continuation of the hashtag DK Pledge, is to make sure that I take the time and the opportunity to get as much information out about private equity. And for anybody who's interested in private equity, I would just encourage them to visit the website that has any type of learning tools on there, www.kendricklaw.net, and join us for a conference call. And also you see some information on there. I'm speaking at Kennesaw State at a business boot camp class on October the 14th. And I do have some free complimentary tickets. So if anybody is interested in a all-day business boot camp class at Kennesaw State on October the 14th, I will be there. There'll be some other great speakers there, particularly for startups, for people who are trying to find their way. Make sure you check that information out on my website.
Absolutely, and we'll make sure that we broadcast that information too so they can get in contact with you for those free tickets.
Okay, great.
Well, thank you so much again for stopping by and for chatting with us. I think that people need to definitely contact you, and it makes a world of difference to know that there is help out there to help raise capital so that we can, like you were saying, just make that generational wealth and establish businesses that are going to last. And so we need partnerships like you, and those are going to let them allow them to do it the right way, as you said.
Exactly.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Boss Spotlight. Again, this is brought to you by Fifth Third Bank and New York Life. I am Tamara Diane, your host. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at boss_exec. And Darshun, before you go, your Twitter handle too, so they can follow you as well.
Yes, please follow me on Twitter. We have great fun on Twitter. It's at Kendrick Law, so it's very, very direct. But please follow me on Twitter as well. That's where you can get a lot of company updates and promotions, and I tweet out all types of helpful information and pictures and things like that. So please follow me at Kendrick Law.
Absolutely. And thank you again for tuning in. Thank you so much, Darshun, for stopping by. And I hope each and every one of you have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.